Welcome back to Breaking Bet here on this Wednesday, November 20th. We're a week away from Thanksgiving. Great holiday, a lot of food. I think it's actually one of the more underrated holidays, if we're being honest here. But in any case, I got my guy Eric Pauly here to help me break down a pretty good slate, if we're being honest. One of the better slates in recent weeks here in the NFL. Eric Pauly, how you doing, brother?
What's going on? Yeah, no, I wish only that the Thanksgiving slate of games is going to be better this year, but we can talk about that next week. Like you mentioned, Johnny, like obviously with the NFL, there's going to be weeks where you obviously want to bet on it because it's the NFL. You know you're going to be sitting there on your couch watching it more likely than not. But some weeks are just not, you don't have as big of an edge on certain games. You don't like certain matches as much. And it's hard to sometimes like take a step back and be like, okay, like last week I had 6 bets because I like 6 games. This week I only like 2 games. You still figure out a way to get 6 bets in. Like, never do that. Try to stick true to what you actually like. I feel like for me personally, the last couple of weeks I haven't loved a lot, but I think I'm a lot more in tune with the board. I guess I'll put it this week. So I'd have a lot more things I'm more confident in. A couple of things I bet already, and looking forward to chopping it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to recap last week's show, we got into the awards markets. I think right now is a good time for us to start giving everybody a taste. We're past the halfway point. We have a very good sample size of how the races are shaping up, who the candidates are, who might be a surprise in. And we went into pretty good detail on the MVP with Lamar and Josh Allen, and we talked about what happens if the Ravens lose to the Steelers and the Bills beat the Chiefs, and that's ultimately what happened. And you know, you were saying with Lamar, if the Ravens lost and the Bills won, you thought he was going to go from plus 110 to 11-1, which I thought was a little overreactive.
Like 5-1, 6-1.
But he didn't even go to 4. 4-1 was where I said, and he didn't even go to 4-1. He went to 2-1, which I really don't get. I think he's way too short right now. I think he should be probably double the price he currently is, given what's going on with the standings. But another guy that we mentioned was Jared Goff, where we talked about coming into the week before he played the Texans. So I think it was week 10. Coming into week 10, he was 8-1. Then after that Texans game, 5 picks, which the recency bias, it's poison. He moves to 40-1, which never made sense. And then he just dominates 400 yards, 4 tutties. And guess what, Eric? He's back to 8-1, 7-1, even in some cases, which, okay, is rightful. And we spent a lot of time on that. And you remember, like, Goff now, big game. He's currently right back in the mix. So anybody that grabbed Goff at 40-1 and recognized the stupidity of bettors and the market, bravo on you. You really got some juice right now. If Goff's over 4,000 yards, 35 touchdowns, and the Lions at the 1 tier are 15-2, you definitely got a live ticket. 100%. But today, we are talking about Offensive Player of the Year. Eric, I'm going to start it off here. Derrick Henry has been the favorite predominantly the whole season. He had a down game against the Steelers where he fumbled. He did not eclipse 100 yards. He did have a touchdown. But for anybody that watched that, and a lot of people, and I saw it on Twitter, and like real time, you're like, wait, is Derrick Henry hurt? Because this guy in the critical moment in a tight game did not touch the football in the 4th quarter. Think about what I just said. One of the best closers in the NFL in the last 25 plus years in a tight game, in a crucial game to determine a division, possibly playoff seeding, did not touch the rock. What the hell happened?
Beats me. I mean, the Ravens, the last couple of weeks, and even full season wise, like they're 15th in neutral pass rate. This is a team that you would expect that I have in the past. You know, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Obviously, they changed OCs last season. They add Derrick Henry, so you expect maybe a little bit more running out of Baltimore. But obviously, Lamar is amazing throwing and/or running, so they're trying to take advantage of some of these matchups they have with guys on the outside like Zay Flowers and of course Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. They have talented pass catching weapons, so they're trying to integrate a little bit more of that as well. But I can't speak for that, Johnny. I don't know why you would go away from Derrick Henry. He's obviously a guy who gets better as the game goes on, a la Saquon Barkley, which I'm sure we'll talk about shortly. And he also gets better, as the calendars turn and he gets harder to tackle in the colder weather. And I can't speak to it, Johnny. Maybe Ravens saw something. I mean, they did basically, they came back. They had a chance of that 2-point conversion to tie the game and go to overtime. So it's hard to say that, it didn't work per se, but it is a little bit shocking to see a guy like Derrick Henry, who also to note he's a 2-down back at this point as well. Like they really have rarely used him on 3rd down all season long. And it's not really a diss to Henry. Just he's obviously a truck when he's getting the football and he's running. But if you're pass protecting, you don't want Derrick Henry necessarily back there pass protecting for you or going out and catching a ton of balls. So I don't think it's like an egregious decision, but it is a little bit puzzling as to why you wouldn't try to lean on Henry. And then again, you can make the argument that it worked as they did, score that touchdown, miss the 2-point conversion to end up, sending it to overtime. But I don't know, Johnny. It's a little bit odd.
Yeah, and I think the thing that a lot of people may notice is if you look at Henry since that Tampa game started, the game where it was a 10-point finish, but Baltimore had a sizable lead. Since that Tampa game on Monday, October 21st, Henry has had 15 carries, 11 carries, had the one big game in Denver with 23 carries, 16 carries against the Bengals, and only 13 carries against Pittsburgh. So I know John Harbaugh was talking about how he wants to limit the usage and not have Henry be a 25, 30 carry a game guy, which makes sense. I mean, Baltimore's got big aspirations and you want Henry as fresh as possible. But that you can get away with having him 15 carries when you're winning. When you lose and you give Henry the ball 15 times, Henry only had 13 carries against the Steelers. To me, it doesn't make sense. But in any case, bro, Henry's still leading the NFL in carries at 197, 1,185 yards, 13 tutters. At this point in time, with 7 games left, Henry's on pace for over 1,800 yards and 20 touchdowns just in the rush department. And because of the game he had, his minus 150 favorite status flipped to about plus 150. Saquon Barkley is currently the favorite at plus 115. I know Barkley was a guy you were high on. I know you talked about him for Offensive Player of the Year. I honestly thought he wouldn't be anywhere close to what he's doing. It wasn't really a result that he's not good. I just felt like the amount of volume probably would fade a little bit down the stretch of the season. But, I mean, credit to Barkley, man. He's found a new gear in Philly. The loss of Jason Kelce wasn't as dramatic as I think I and a lot of other people thought. Saquon Barkley currently trending with 1,137 yards, second at best, 8 touchdowns, 197 carries, tied with Henry. But his receiving has been very good, 23 catches, 210 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I'll say this. I think Saquon Barkley really didn't have that great of a game against Washington. I think the box score watchers be like, what are you talking about? He had a $152 touchdowns. I mean, yeah, but, he was bottled up for most of the game. And then in the fourth quarter with Washington down, they had to take a couple chances to try and generate a big play to get back in the game. And, lack of discipline kind of sprung Barkley a couple times for 30-plus yard touchdown. So I think that kind of turned the market. Do you think Saquon right now plus 115 is a bet you'd be willing to make, or would you wait for Henry to have one of those big games and then buy back?
If I'm going down the board, I'm looking at Jamar or Lamar. I'm not betting any. Again, it's week 12, right? I hate to be that guy, but obviously it's football. But Saquon could get hurt on Sunday. Lamar could get. Derrick Henry can get hurt in his next game. You know what I mean? So to bet a plus 150 to then have to wait 12 more weeks to get your payout back. I don't know that that's necessarily something I'm interested in doing. But I'm just gonna have to big time disagree with you on what Saquon did against Washington. It's been his MO all year long. They're just running the hell out of Saquon, and he's getting better later in games as their good offensive line still is wearing down opponents. And yeah, he did some things in the receiving game. He had that, big catch, that big play. We discussed some potential negative correlation plays that would have went through the hoop there in that matchup with him only getting 2 catches, but having that massive reception for a touchdown. But I have Saquon to lead the NFL in rushing yards this year preseason. That was a 10-1 bet I gave out here. I gave out in Parlay Science, of course. And the thing to also note is they've had their bye. The Ravens have not had their bye. He's only sitting 27, 28 yards behind Derrick Henry. So I think it's definitely Saquon's award to lose at that point. I think it's his rushing title to lose as well. And I don't think you can fault a player for getting fouled up and exploding in the fourth quarter. I think that's also 100% by design. And yeah, you can comment about Sirianni and maybe this offense and Kellen Moore and how you would they have two great weapons on the outside, obviously A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. But what do they want to do? They want to hand the ball to the best offensive player on the field, and that is Saquon Barkley. And obviously, I'm not doing any victory laps just yet, but I think it'd be foolish to write off his last performance and not anticipate this continuing, barring any injury, because obviously that's part of the game. Like Saquon, and this is what I expected, and we'll see if it ends up being the case at the end of the season. But this is exactly what I expected of Saquon and the Eagles, and I think that he is rightfully now leading the pack. He's an absolute animal.
Well, I know we will disagree on that last game, but I know for a fact you were all over Barkley this year. That is one I absolutely can 100% validate. The interesting thing here now becomes the other guys. Jamar Chase is having a fantastic year. Right now, he's got 73 catches, 1,056 yards, 12 touchdowns, leading the league, triple crown right now. He's on pace as of today for 113 catches, 1,632 yards, 19 touchdowns. 19 touchdowns is off the charts. 1,632 yards is good, but that's nothing. That's not groundbreaking. 113 catches, very good, not groundbreaking. In the plus 650 territory, do you think Jamar Chase now is somebody that has a realistic shot to win with the Bengals fading right now? If they don't make the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't know historically if team success factors into this award. It's something I actually I'm gonna look up when you start going back on your thoughts. But what Jamar Chase is doing is looking like the best receiver in football. I mean, obviously him, Reek, Jetta is no need to mince. You could just respect all the amazing players that they are. Obviously, Reek hasn't had the season we've wanted with quarterback injuries, his injuries himself, etc. But no, I mean, you're talking about at this point performing by far as the best wide receiver in football. His target rate is also absolutely absurd. That's also considering he missed the game and was kind of limited in getting. I don't want to say limited, but it took him a little bit to get reacclimated after kind of sitting out this summer. So I would definitely look at Jamar Chase as well, and he thinks he's rightfully priced there as the third favorite, even though it's obviously a much bigger discrepancy between Barkley, Henry, and him. But Jamar Chase definitely still has my attention.
Yeah, Jamar Chase was a guy I highlighted preseason. I talked about, and I remember saying this probably in August and September, and I said it on this show. He's a guy I would keep my eye on. I'd put a pin in and keep my eye on. I wouldn't bet right away because of the holdout for week one. And then typically when guys hold out, a lot of times they either don't perform well that year, they get hurt, or it takes them a while to get going. And of course, when we finally see Jamar Chase get back on the field, the Bengals are already 0-2. And by the time the first quarter of the season's over, they have one win, and that's when it's difficult. So the one question I have there is obviously Chase's numbers are gonna be great, and right now he's projecting as a triple crown leader, which I think the last person to do that was Cooper Kupp 3 years ago. But the issue is now you're going up against Barkley and Henry, two playoff teams, two guys who are directly impacting the playoff picture. I think if the Bengals find a way to sneak in, then I think Chase is definitely live. I just think given the status of the Bengals in the playoff race, especially after losing to the Chargers on Monday night, that directly impacts them. I think Lamar is interesting at 14-1. Because if Lamar ends up having 4,000 plus yards, 40 total touchdowns, but the Ravens are, say, a 5 seed, say they don't win the division, and Lamar's cooked in the MVP race, given how historically it goes to a quarterback of a 1 or 2 seed, I think Lamar at 14-1 is definitely appealing. they might want to find a way to give him the award. So it's definitely somebody I'd keep my eye on. Jefferson, no. Josh Allen, no. Kyron, I love my Kyron Williams. He's having a good year, but it's not as good as I expected. Josh Jacobs, no. The other guy is Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow right now is the best quarterback in football. He is leading in touchdowns and he's leading in pass yards. And with how bad the defense has been, he's having to throw a lot more. So we can realistically see Burrow maybe get 5,000 yards and 40-plus touchdowns. And he's at 150-1 right now. If the Bengals miss the playoffs, but Burrow has those astronomical numbers, do you think he's a good bet?
Good bet for $10. Yeah, good, like, heavy position. No. I actually found some numbers. Shout out to Cleve TI. He does amazing work. I'm looking at his site right now. These, like, you're curious about Jamar Chase, and now I guess we're talking Joe Burrow, whether or not making the playoffs is a factor in this award. It absolutely is. These players, the last 14 winners of this award have made the playoffs, and their team have won 10 or more games with an average of 12 wins per season in those games. So we are still looking similarly to the MVP award, where we're looking at studs. And if you're talking about running back winners, like obviously Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley we're talking about players who are either leading the league in rush yards, rushing touchdowns, or both. So considering that they're both in the mix to have one or the other, or potentially both for either one of their cases, I think it is rightfully so a two-person race at this point, especially, again, considering that these teams are, I don't want to say undoubtedly for the Ravens at this point, but should be surefire playoff teams. I think the fact that it is a two-man race makes a lot more sense. To your question, like I said, if you have an extra $10 you want to put on Joe Burrow, not going to not advocate to ever bet 150-1 on anything if you could spare 10 bones. But no, I think it is rightfully a two-man race. Injuries, of course, to shake this up. But considering some of the historical factors, because, again, we're talking about voting. We're talking about people and their tendencies and what they do when choosing the award. We're talking about guys who are leading the league, for running backs at least, rush yards, rush touchdowns. That's what we have in Barkley and Henry. And one of them could even end with both, or even if it's 1-1, it doesn't ruin the other person's candidacy. So I think it's Barkley. Henry is definitely the two chalk at this point. 12 weeks in are rightfully so the two favorites.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree. I feel like when I saw this, it was a lot of playoff teams. A lot of these awards are centered around teams that make the playoffs. But I will say this. Right now, betting Barkley or Henry it's a coin toss. It can change any week. It can change if Henry has 100 yards, 2 touchdowns on Monday night against the Chargers. He probably jumps to the favorite. So it's obviously a game-by-game thing. But I will say this. Keep your eye on the Bengals. I think they're in trouble, obviously, but they're home to the Steelers next week. No easy game, of course. But if they split with the Steelers, who they played last week of the season, then they're at Dallas the following week. So December 9th, that's a winnable game. At the Titans, should be a winnable game. Home to the Browns, that is winnable. Home to the Broncos is tough, but I would think, honestly, the Bengals probably out of their last 6 games would have to win at least 4 to have some kind of a chance, because that would put them at 8 and 9. I don't think that'll do it. So they probably got to win 5 and go 9 and 8 to make it there. So they probably have to win 5 of their last 6 games in order to do that. So if you think that's going to happen, then it's worth a shot for Joe Burrow at $10, considering the numbers he's going to have.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on here. Week 12. What's your favorite looks looking at this board?
My favorite bet that I've already played is Seattle moneyline.
Seattle moneyline. Why is that?
So obviously I don't want to take away too much from what Arizona has done, because not only are they currently leading the NFC West, they've done it against an absolute gauntlet of opponents. Seattle was a team that I've talked about numerous times in the show. I was very high on them in the summer. I have alternate win total overs that are also alive now after that win against San Francisco. That was huge for my future portfolio there. And I think it did close in a Royal Mint spot, Johnny. I don't know if you got in. I don't know if I'm correct, but I did see some 5.5
No,
popping up.
I think it did on FanDuel, and I was looking at it on draft. I caught it too late. I was in the middle of sweating something, and I caught it too late. I was just checking the lines, and like, bro, like right at 4:05 as the game kicked off, and I'm like, no, I good spot.
Yeah, so I think Seattle at this point is somehow underrated. I know that their defense has had all their issues. A lot of that was due to injury, obviously new system. They played a lot better against San Francisco, as we saw. I know Geno is not playing as well as he was last year, but we're still talking about like a competent quarterback. And their offensive line, which has been kind of bad now, I know they lost their center to like a random retirement. But I think that now that Jack Smith and Jigba's kind of really woken up, you have DK Metcalf. Obviously, Lockett is still there as a reliable. We're both big Ken Walker fans and know that what he can do when he gets going. I don't think that the Arizona defense is going to be good enough to slow down this offense. And I think that the Seattle defense is only improving. And it's something that we've talked about a lot, how, this team's expected to be good. They were bad. Then it's like, okay, at what point do you say, like, it's over, like, this is just a bad defense? And I think considering the injuries that they've gone through so far this season, now that they're finally coming back healthy a little bit, I do expect just general improvement from this team. Another thing is, like, defensively, their big problems are on early downs. They're 29th in early down EPA per play, meaning as, obviously you want to try to get your teams behind the sticks. They haven't been doing a good job of that. But their third down metrics are good. Their turnover metrics are good. Let me look at some of their luck metrics while we're at it. Those have been like pretty solid. Their turnover metrics aren't good, and those are things that like to regress. And we know that Arizona's defense is Swiss cheese. They've been punching above their weight class, doing a lot with a little, which, kudos to them and the staff. But I think at this point, Seattle's underrated. I make Arizona 2.5-point underdogs in this game. And that is kind of at the cusp of when I'm like, okay, are my numbers like truly off? Where I'm like, I'm so like, if it's, 3 or more points, I'm obviously, like I've said many times, I'm not an expert at this just yet. I'm trying to become one. I defer to the market. I'm talking 2.5 points off. You maybe make a couple other slight adjustments. I can get closer to the 1, but still either way, that's even money on FanDuel on the money line. I'm all for it, and I bet it already. Seattle money line is probably my favorite bet of the week.
Seattle money line is very interesting to me. I've actually had a tough time with the Cardinals this year, trying to pick and choose. It's a team that I say every week, the highest variance team in the NFL, and when they want to show up, they could be the best team in football. It's the most bizarre thing ever. And in 2022, the end of 22 and pretty much all of 23, there was nobody in the world that knew what the Arizona Cardinals were going to do before I did. That was a team that I would bet every week because I always had an advantage, I felt, and most of the time it hit. This year it's been so hit or miss, and for the most part, I've kind of stayed away from them lately. But one reason why I might disagree with you on that game, and I mean, since we're already talking it, we can go, start with that one first, is because the thing that's been really struggled with Seattle this year, and we both like Seattle coming. We both felt Seattle could be a playoff team. Mike McDonald coming over, Geno, the weapons, Kenny Walker. The defense is supposed to be really good. McDonald was going to bring that Baltimore DNA to this defense, and then they have pieces. But their run defense has been terrible. It's been one of the worst run defenses in football. And obviously, we know there was some key injuries throughout the year. But, the thing that Arizona does really well is run the football. They're top 5 in the NFL at 149.4 yards per game in the run. James Conner has found a second gear in his career with the Cardinals. Kyler Murray, obviously, is always a threat to use his legs, and they use like Amari DiMercato and Trey Benson. So I think that could be the advantage there. I am interested in the matchup with Marvin Harrison and Tariq Woolen, but I think right now it's a little bit. I need a little bit more information on the injury report, and I want to make sure that I'm doing my proper studying. But early look for me right now would probably be with the Arizona money line. It is worth noting, though, that Arizona's won 4 in a row. They've looked really good. They're coming off of a bye week. So coming off a bye week, I think is probably working a little bit more in their favor. With Seattle this week, they're there, then they're at Minnesota, then they come home to Seattle. So they face the Seahawks twice in 3 weeks. Chances are I could probably see this being a split. So if Seattle took the game at home, then maybe I could see that. But the thing is, why I kind of like Arizona this week is coming off the bye fresh with 2 weeks to prepare for this game. They could see Seattle. Then when they go at Minnesota, which is a game they could lose, then I probably see the Cardinals losing the following week after having played Minnesota. So I think they have a better chance to get Seattle here fresh off the bye.
No, I get it, but just matchup wise, I think Arizona, like I've said, like obviously they're a very good team at this point, and they've beaten or played against a gauntlet of teams so far. It literally doesn't get much more difficult than how Arizona has started this season in terms of some matchups, especially at the quarterback position, which obviously changes a lot. But I think that Seattle is kind of catching their groove. And in the same way that the bye week could be, a major factor, like road favorites off the bye since 2000 are 60 and 37 against the number. That's 62%. So that is kind of going into the favor right there. But as we just saw, of course, obviously the Packers last week in that same spot failed to cover the spread. I think there is a possibility you can make the argument. I don't have the numbers, so I'm not going to die on this hill, but you can make the argument that it's a momentum killer that they won 4 straight, then had to stop playing football.
I mean, definitely could be. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm not a big the trend is fun. It's fodder. For me, and I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but in my opinion, trend betting is fun. It's something like, hey, if I'm having a tough time making up my mind, maybe I might lean with that. Or if I'm writing an article and I want to put some, supporting arguments and some fluff in there, then it's fine. But trend betting for me be like, oh, well, in the last 10 games, this X, Y, or Z happened. Every game, as you know, is a case by case. Everything is unique. It's like that old philosophy, you never step in the same river twice. That's kind of what I equate it to. But I mean, listen, bro, it's a coin flip game for a reason. I could definitely see Seattle win this game. They're at home and, maybe they're finally finding their groove, and absolutely. But for me right now, early lean on this Wednesday, which it is subject to change, I would like to see the Cardinals on my card.
No, and I get that. I will say on the trend thing, I'm very anti-trend, and I'm in fact fading a trend right now. But at the same time, there's a difference between trends and situations. Like favorites off a bye is the situational look versus, like NFC North teams, the Bears and the Packers are 5-5 against the spread in their last 10 matchups. Like that's obviously BS. Like there's different quarterbacks, different head coaches, different everything. So it is every game obviously is individual. But looking at general situations, I think is much more valuable than ever looking at like a trend. I think you could definitely find some situational matchups, like we've even talked about, coming off a Monday Night Football win and then going, across the country, or coming off, Monday Night Football favorites. Like those are situations versus trends. And obviously, again, nothing is even close to set in stone, nor is it worthwhile making a bet on. But no, I'm sticking with Seattle, and that's. At this point in time on Wednesday at 7:20, I bet it probably like 3-4 o'clock at even money at FanDuel. 2-unit bets, one of my favorite bets of the week.
All right, fair enough. We'll come back on the spot on Wednesday. Maybe you can. Maybe we have a few days left in the week. Maybe you can convince me again. The game that I am really interested on, and there's a lot in the late afternoon windows. The 1 o'clocks really aren't that great this week. The actions in the late window. I'm going to go Sunday night. Philadelphia Eagles, Los Angeles Rams. The Eagles on the road are 2.5-point favorite. They're trending towards 3. So right now on FanDuel, it's 2.5 minus 120. So you're about a straw away from tipping the scales to a field goal game. Eric, I really want to take the Rams. I want the Rams to win. I think Philadelphia is good, and they're finally hitting their stride. But I don't think they're as good as the media and some analysts are making them out to be. like they've definitely gotten great performances from Quinyon Mitchell, like their rookie who's definitely trending for rookie of the year, which, by the way, Quinyon Mitchell from the Eagles, the defensive back, and the defensive end, Jared Verse for the Rams, right now are the top 2 defensive rookie of the year favorites. And, this potentially could go a long way in determining that race. I'm not knocking the Eagles because I do think they are good. I think they're very talented. I think they're playing with a lot of swagger right now. They're playing with a lot of confidence. They can beat you in several different ways. And I do have questions about the Rams. I don't think the Rams played particularly well at New England. And yes, it's a long travel. That's probably one of the longest travels you can have in the NFL on the continental United States. But, Drake May for a while was able to move the ball on them. He was able to continue drives. And, the Rams were able to score against New England's defense, but I think we'd agree that New England's defense isn't Philadelphia's. So I am seeing a little bit of issues, head versus heart, taking the Rams in this spot. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are studs, and I think this could be a game maybe a little bit more Demarcus Robinson is featured, getting a nickel corner per se in a single matchup here. Even though I want the Rams and I could see them winning this game, I kind of think the Eagles might be the play for me on the road.
So I think it's actually a good matchup for Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford has historically been great against the blitz, but this current season has been terrible with pressure in his face. The Eagles are a team that does not blitz a ton, nor do they get a lot of pressure just from their base packages. Like they did well against Washington, but Washington's offensive line has been punching above its weight class all year long. So I wasn't shocked to see kind of a little bit of a beatdown last Thursday. I had the under there. That was a good look, but I stayed away from Washington, which would have covered any teasers there with that late Ertz touchdown. But I picked this game 2.5. So I'm running the number here. So I don't have a strong opinion. I want the Eagles to win for my best record future, which is, alive and well. Obviously, Detroit's got to string together a loss or two, and you look at their schedule, you find it hard. You're pretty hard pressed to find any really losses for Goff and those Lions. But in terms of the matchup, I think it kind of does favor the Rams. I have nothing but, even when Philly started off kind of looking like crap, I've, kind of stuck on my guns on that take. And I don't need to, add a unit on something that I'm not really too confident in. Like I said, my numbers are right on the money here. I make it Philly minus 2.5. So at 3, I actually would see value with Los Angeles. But again, considering what I currently have and how I'm not trying to, be forcing NFL plays, I will probably not be betting this game. But I can certainly see the argument for the Rams, though I will be rooting for the Birds on Sunday night.
Yeah, I would like the Rams to win. I have the Detroit Lions. I would like them to get the 1 seed. I don't want there to be any competition. I think it's worth noting, too, for anybody looking to buy the Rams in the futures. They have the Eagles this week at home. Then they're at New Orleans. Then they're home to Buffalo. Then they're at the 49ers. Then they're at the Jets. Then they're home to the Cardinals, home to the Seahawks. That is a gauntlet. That's a really, really tough schedule to finish out the year. And, I know people might be saying, what about the Rams 5-1 for the NFC West? I mean, you can dream, but I probably wouldn't be going there. Listen, I do agree. I think the Rams can score and move the ball. I mean, if you really look at who the Eagles have played, they haven't really beaten anybody good. The best offense they faced was the Bengals. And, credit them. They went on the road and they handled Cincinnati, only scored 17 points. So it wouldn't surprise me to see the Rams put up, say, 21 to 24 points. But I'm not sold on what their defense is. I think their defense has a couple playmakers, but I think overall as a unit, it is very beatable. And I just don't know if they're going to have enough firepower to cover Devontae Smith, Arthur Shelby Brown, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, with Jalen Hurts at the helm. So that's ultimately why I lean Philly here. But, I hope the Rams win.
Well, part of why I liked the Eagles' best record is because of the schedule they faced. You only play who's in front of you. and they have a relatively easy schedule. Not relatively, a very easy schedule. Only 2 games. Obviously, Rams is tough. Then Ravens, then Steelers. The rest of it's kind of a wash, even with including being in Washington, D.C. I don't think that while I think it's a game they match up really well, and as we saw on Thursday night. But my thing on the Rams, and this is the last thing I'll say before we move on, 5-1 to win the NFC West, I would pass. But if you are intrigued by the Rams and you really, again, have an extra $10 lying around, I see some slight value on them to win the entire NFC. Not again advocating to deploy even a full unit on a 35-1 as they are at FanDuel right now. But if you're intrigued by the Rams, I think a way to have some fun for the rest of the season would be to take a stab on a 35-1 for them to win the whole NFC. Obviously, highly unlikely, but again, that's some lunch money you want to play around with. You want like a longer term sweat. You want a bigger payout. I would look to go on the crazier route and take them to even win the NFC. Just a sprinkle.
I did that last year, and I was disappointed when they didn't beat the Lions. All right, let's get to the full slate here, starting with Thursday Night Football. The Steelers, 3.5 points at Cleveland with a very low 36.5 point total. Eric, kick me off.
Yeah, weather is the name of the game here. First potential weather game. High probability of 20, 25 plus mile per hour winds on that lakefront. I don't know the exact probability of snow, but snow is potentially in the forecast for tomorrow night. And I'm not betting this, but I kind of like Cleveland, not only against the spread, but on the money line. So much of Pittsburgh's success has come from a very inefficiently run offense where they're either connecting on I don't want to say lucky because Russell, as we talked about last week, he still's got that beautiful moon ball. Like it still looks good. But he's an absolute statue in the pocket. Cleveland's still second in pressure rate this year, despite their defense not performing up to the standards you'd expect it to be at. And Russell Wilson, not good scrambling, quite literally one of the worst scrambling quarterbacks in football. Not good off platform right now because he can't run in tough in a closing pocket with the Steelers' offensive line. That's not great either. And if that wind is howling and those deep completions that they're somehow making, again, we're talking about 50-50 balls, probably not even 50-50 realistically. But, those long conversions to even a Mike Williams in that Commanders game or those George Pickens deep throws down the field, if the wind is howling like that and take that out of Russ's arsenal entirely, and you're just focusing on, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, and then some, quick intermediate passing game to the Steelers' weapons, which aren't really that great outside of George Pickens. I think Cleveland can have an edge there if they're getting pressure. And on the flip side, Jameis Winston, of course, he's gonna make some terrible bonehead plays. He's also gonna hopefully connect on something crazy. And yes, that deep ball, issue could still, in the wind, could certainly hinder him as well. But I would like to think Nick Chubb can finally kind of get going a little bit on this short week. And Cleveland has been better on it at home throughout the course of the Stefanski era and just in general. And if it's kind of like an ugly smash up on the game, I totally see why the under is, where it's at in the first place. Add on potential giant winds and snow, then add on again the Steelers' offenses like we talked about last 2 weeks. I didn't think last week was the week for Russ to come back down to earth. This could be the week where we're finally seeing, Russ. I'm not going to say he's cooked because he's playing good football, but I think we're going to start seeing some Twitter takes going back to, Russ is cooked. I think that is possible on Thursday. Not if anything, I'll sprinkle the money line, just like a little sprinkle. I'll post it in Parlay Science if I do. Hop in the Discord to get the whole card, but I kind of like the home dog here.
Interesting. I mean, I can see it go either way. I really can. Pittsburgh's been relatively great against the run this year. Maybe it's a heavy Nick Chubb game. I don't know if I see Jameis Winston do what he does last week. I think the Steelers defense is they've been pretty solid against wide receivers. So, the Jerry Jeudy's and the Cedric Tillmans might have a little bit of a quieter game. And these AFC North slugfests where it's like slugging through the mud, those games are just like such a crapshoot. Mm-hmm. You do know my motto. I like the laying the 3.5s. That's been very successful. That's like one of my betting numbers that I've really gravitated towards. So maybe early look would be the Steelers minus 3.5. But I got to be honest, dude, 36.5 seems even high, especially if those winds, which I want to confirm, they're in the 25 mile an hour range. I mean, bro, you look at Cleveland. I mean, so many of their games have been in the 30s this year. You look at the Steelers. These two get together. I think that the total here with the win that can take the kicking out of it a little bit, where there's going to be a little bit more of heavier running attacks with Nick Chubb, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, short passes, longer drives, less big plays. I feel like 36.5 is probably looking towards the under, and that's something I think I might hit for Thursday.
Yeah, and we'll see what ends up happening with the market and the weather, of course. But this opened 39.5. Got down to as low as 35.5. So obviously the market to a degree is expecting the weather, but even if this gets back up to 38.5 and the weather looks clear, I still like the under here. So I'm with you where these are two teams that are going to slug it out, and what I expect to be an ugly Thursday night football game. And if we get the snow and the wind, then we could see this total drop back down to even 35. But I guess just a note that's worth making is this bad boy has been bet down 3 full points upon speculation of the weather. They get bet back up again to 36.5, but just still worth noting.
Yeah, definitely a good point noting. Minnesota Vikings, another 3.5 at Chicago. Chicago, heartbreak kids. Minnesota, I mean, really has not played well these last 2 weeks. They're in a tough road. I mean, tough is a relative term, but this is tough. This is their third straight game on the road. They barely hung on with Jacksonville. Sam Darnold was a disaster at Jacksonville against Mac Jones, a game they narrowly survived. At Tennessee last week, Tennessee was hanging tough. Calvin Ridley had a monster touchdown callback off very suspect illegal formation. So, Minnesota really hasn't looked that good. Chicago, on the other hand, it's hard to say because they've got some variance to them. They played really tough against Green Bay. Their defense was pretty good. They only allowed 20 points to a good Packers offense. And their offense was sustaining drives against what's supposed to be a good Packers defense. Now, obviously, I think Minnesota's defense is a little bit better than Green Bay's, but I mean, I don't know if I can lay these points with Minnesota, man. I think the way they've been playing, it definitely has to come back to bite them in the ass at some point.
So last week was obviously the first week without Shane Waldron. Obviously, every Chicagoan, however you want to pronounce that, was calling for his head. But if you dug deep, you knew that Waldron, while part of the problem, was absolutely not the whole problem. A lot of the big issues for Chicago was their pass blocking, and Caleb Williams, he was pretty bad prior to when I say pretty bad, like very bad in terms of just holding the football way too long and inducing his own pressure. And that's something that I think is very important when evaluating quarterbacks is, there's a sack ratio. Is that on the offensive line, or is the quarterback taking their sweet time and, or running around in the pocket in places he shouldn't be running, maybe instead of stepping up, taking a step left, right, etc., and inducing his own sacks. Caleb Williams had his best game of not inducing his own sacks this past week against Green Bay. I think that's something that's going to be very massive to note for the Bears for the rest of the season, because if that is something that Williams cleans up, I know he's had his issues with, even hitting some very short intermediate passes and times where he looks like an inaccurate quarterback. I think those kind of things will kind of go away and he'll start to, live up to more of his potential and become closer to the hype that he's gotten. At this point, I think it's fair to say he's nowhere near and probably won't be as good as the pre-draft hype, but he's definitely a decent quarterback. So his time to throw and the fact that it's going to increase and the fact that the pressure, and he's not giving himself more QB-induced pressures by holding the ball for no reason. I think if that stays sticky and that stays true, the Bears are going to be a team that is scrappy in the mix throughout the rest of the season. That said, they're playing a better defense in Minnesota this week. Green Bay's defense is very good, but we're going to see a lot of Brian Flores. It's his bread and butter. Loves to blitz, and rookie quarterbacks generally don't do well against a blitz and against, especially with a bad offensive line. So something that I'm just noting. I'm kind of speaking more generally. I'm kind of want you guys to lead to your own conclusions here. I make the game 3. So at 3.5, I see clear value on the Chicago Bears getting a over that field goal, especially in a matchup where 3 is obviously the biggest important number there. But at this point, I think the right thing to do, or I should say the smarter thing to do, is to wait and see. Second game, new OC. Don't want to, live off the recency bias that you and I discussed ad nauseum in the NFL, which is one of the biggest things about the NFL market is there's a ton of recency bias included. What's real, what isn't? Is Caleb Williams really just a bad quarterback that induces his own pressure? Or is Caleb Williams still a young, developing, blossoming quarterback that wasn't getting help from his former play caller? Especially considering Thomas Brown as a play caller in Carolina last year was bad. So calling one good Caleb Williams, not even good, one solid Caleb Williams game and one solid Thomas Brown game, a win in that, everything's fixed would be an obvious overreaction. But also calling, and we'll see what's more sticky, his prior bigger season, 11-week, 10-week sample size, or his 1-week sample size. Too early to tell. I think the best way to do this, unless you see something that I'm not seeing at the moment, obviously we have time for this game to happen. My thing is to sit back on the sidelines and wait and see. But if we're talking pure numbers, gun to head, I see value with Chicago.
Let me ask you a question real quick before we move on. And I'll say this. I think the Bears are interesting, but you have two teams that have not allowed more than 19 points per game. Both teams are one of the better scoring defenses in football. So I think 39.5 towards the under is definitely something that I see more value in. I'd probably right now lean the Bears. I think it's too early for me to make a full decision. I would lean Bears with the points. And I think the under is probably a better play. But one thing I want to note, the Bears obviously play Sunday at home. But then on the short week with Thanksgiving, they go to Detroit. Do you think their preparation, not necessarily look ahead spot, changes at all with the short week and the holiday at the Lions, and they're playing at a 12:30 game? It's not like it's a Thursday night game.
Well, considering their coach stinks, I think it'd be fair to anticipate some nonsense from them and not being prepared for this game or even that game on Thanksgiving, which we'll obviously talk about more detail next week. But I think it's a fair question to ask. I don't have an answer for that, but I think that coaching needs to be, incorporated into anything, especially in the National Football League. And again, you're dealing with one of the best defensive coordinators in football in Brian Flores, one of the better offensive minds in Kevin O'Connell. And on the flip side, you're dealing with Thomas Brown, who again sucked in Carolina last year and played one decent game, called one decent game this past week. And Matt Eberflus, who is probably one of the worst coaches still coaching. So I think it's a fair thing to evaluate. How do you quantify that into your handicap? That beats me. If you figure that out, hit me with a DM and let me know. But I personally, Johnny, I don't have a great answer for you, but I think it is something to at least consider at the very least.
And for anybody else wondering, this is Chicago's final 7 games. They're home to Minnesota this week. They're at Detroit on Thanksgiving, short week. They're at the 49ers the following week, in 2 weeks after, or the following week. Then they're at Minnesota. Then they're home to Detroit. Then they're home to Seattle. Then they're at Green Bay. This 4-win Chicago team might be tough for them to even get to 6 wins with the schedule that they have. All right. I've been waiting for this moment. You know why? We're going Tampa Bay, -5.5, the inverted Royal Mint at the New York Giants. You know who's back. Tommy D, Tommy Cutlets. Up here in North Jersey, we're getting a lot of buzz with the kid coming back. We're getting the encore, Eric. Very excited. We weren't sure if we're ever going to get it again. And for however long it lasts, we're going to enjoy it here. Tommy D, home 5.5 points with Tampa coming off the bye. Sterling Shepard revenge game. Sterling Shepard, my neighbor. So he's probably staying home this weekend. Is it Tampa 5.5 too much? Or do you think Tommy D pulls out some magic from last year?
Nah, give me Tampa. Tampa in a teaser is the first leg. I'll get to the second when we get to that game, but I've locked in Seattle Seattle money line and Tampa money line because at DK it's 6, and then obviously it's PK at that point. So I have Tampa money line in the first leg of that teaser. I'll get to the next leg when we talk about that game. Tommy DeVito this time around. I think when you're dealing with these quarterbacks who are coming into, either their second stint with the team or their first stint with a new team, you have film on them. It's not like last year where it's like, who the hell is Tommy DeVito? What can he do? Let's find out. we have an understanding of what he can do. We understand what this offense is trying to do with Brian Daboll as still the head coach, and now is calling the plays. Like, we know what to expect from Tommy DeVito to a degree. Did this past, 12 months, did he, put on some arm strength and maybe become a better quarterback? Possibly. But this Tampa Bay team, man, like, I was very low on them to start the season. I know this was one that we were going on complete opposite sides on. And to be honest, we'll see what ends up happening, because if they do blow this game and lose, my alternate under wins for Tampa is still alive, considering they only have 4 wins so far. So I guess we'll shake that out to see what goes down there. But I think this Buccaneers defense, they're coming off the bye. They're healthier than they've been. I think they'll be able to fly around. I think Malik Neighbors, there's a lot of questions about, whether he'll be good with DeVito or without him. I think that they're going to funnel targets to him. So I think if you're like a fantasy owner, I don't think you have to be like scared about Neighbors. I think he's going to probably see a same amount, if not even an uptick of fantasy production and just overall, obviously, on the field production. But this Giants team, all the reports in the locker room about how they're, obviously flustered with the Daniel Jones signing. I'm sure you read, the same, New York media that I do, New York, New Jersey media that I do, in terms of the locker room is pissed off. They're confused as to why Daniel Jones is not playing. They're mad about it because, again, you can't fool the guys in the locker room. The guys who go to work every single day, they are the ones who know who's the better quarterback. Obviously, you have the media, you have these advanced metrics, etc., but you can't fool a team of 53 people and say Tommy DeVito is better than Daniel Jones, even though Daniel Jones stinks. Like, they go to practice every day and they see and they know. So considering that, I would expect this to be a spot where we're maybe seeing the start of Brian Daboll's funeral and the nail getting pushed further into the coffin rather than a resurgence. Tampa Bay has obviously been, despite their record, has played some really great games, has played some really tight games against some much better opponents. Baker Mayfield's on a different planet. This defense is still flying around. Mike Evans may even be back. So rest of the season, schedule included, I'm a big Tampa guy, despite my futures, but I will probably be looking to back them in the market, obviously price dependent. But starting me off with a Tampa Bay money line in the teaser leg, I'm not thinking twice.
All right, Malik Neighbors plus 215 on DraftKings. Nothing up on FanDuel just yet, but 215 to score a touchdown for Malik Neighbors against Tampa D. That does allow touchdowns to receivers. I think it's worth consideration. Malik Neighbors has not gotten in the end zone in quite some time. I will also say Sterling Shepard revenge game, 5-1. Score a touchdown. I might have to dabble in on that on my neighbor against the Giants defense that can allow some, especially if Evans is back. He gets Shepard in a 3-receiver set. Maybe he gets loose for 1. Evans is live on DraftKings at plus 155. Obviously, you got the 2 backs, White, Irving, plus 105 each. Evans or Tracy 110, Evans 155, Otten 195, and so down the list it goes. I think there is a few different touchdown scorers live here, but I feel like Tampa right now would be the play that I would lean. I don't know, man. This mania. Everybody said about the veto. No shot. We're doing the same thing, but listen. If the Giants defense can make a couple plays, maybe DeVito breathes some life into this Giants team and has them believing and playing with more confidence. You never know. But early look, I do think the spread would favor Tampa, and I do think the teaser leg is definitely good as well.
And just last point on it too, like you're talking about, again, a well-coached top bulls defense that's going to blitz the absolute hell out of Tommy DeVito. Like last year when you get a couple of wins against the Ron Rivera-led Washington Commanders, like that's not impressive to me. Like now you're playing a real football team. I haven't even looked into. I'll look at his game logs, but again, they're talking about like a superior team, a downgrade at quarterback, a locker room that's clearly in dismay. They're clearly pissed off. I mean, DeVito, he was 3-3 as a starter. He won 3 games, but again, like going against and beating like Washington last year, 31-19. And then you beat New England, that was clearly like throwing away their season. And then they did get that sneaky win on Monday night against Green Bay, which was like one of the craziest L's I've ever taken. That pissed me the hell off. But again, we're not talking about a guy with minimal film. We're talking about a guy that has 6 games of film on him. We know what the Giants are trying to do. We know the vibe of the locker room is currently horrendous. And the Buccaneers, they're feisty and they're good. So I'm all over Tampa.
All right, let's go to New England, 7.5-point underdogs at Miami. I'll say Miami, to me, the win on paper looked better than it really was. The Raiders were playing tough. They were live. Brock Bowers balled out. I think there was a chance for the Raiders to backdoor it, but I think the fourth quarter kind of just got away from them a little bit. New England's playing with a lot more swagger. I know Miami is kind of finding their footing, and it really makes an appealing team to make the playoffs. They're right there in the playoff picture. I think any kind of futures on them in the playoffs is somewhat appealing right now, but I don't know if I'm laying 7.5 here. The Patriots are coming down there at the end of November. They're not coming down there when it's September and it's humid as hell. The weather is nice this time of year in Miami. I think 7.5 early lean right now would probably be New England getting the points.
I agree. My numbers make it 5.5. I see clear value on New England. I also like the over here. I think Miami's defense is overrated. Drake May, obviously, lack of pass catch, but he clearly looks like he has the goods. And I had Las Vegas last week plus the 8.5. Once it got up that high, I was like, okay, I'm in. I literally left my buddy's house as they scored that touchdown. I was like, okay, we maybe have the backdoor cover, get back to my apartment. And then I look at my phone and I see that, the Raiders are not covering shit after letting up a 54-yard touchdown. That was painful all in the game. Digression aside, no, I agree that these teams are – Miami's getting inflated a little bit. They have that big win against the Rams, big win against the Raiders. The Patriots, of course, got that big win in Chicago, then come home and lose to a very good Rams team in a game that you already mentioned. They played well, and they kept it relatively close there, only losing by 6 at the end of the day. But just pure numbers-wise, I can't get to higher than Miami -6. 5.5 is what I make it, and I'm doing a little bit of adjusting as well. As you have to do, I have my raw numbers, and I have my adjusted numbers for injury news, travel situations, etc. Giving me over a touchdown with New England, I absolutely love it. And I like this over as the Patriots defense is still Swiss cheese, make no bones about it. I think this Miami defense has been punching above their weight class as well. I think that both these teams can easily score over 3 touchdowns. And then obviously you're going to need a little bit more spunk to get over that total. But considering these two defenses, how they play, Drake May being, great, and Miami's propensity to actually blow up, I wouldn't be surprised to see like a 30 to 24 style game with New England covering, game going over the total. That's where I'm looking for this one.
No doubt. Houston Texans also 7.5-point favorite at home against the Tennessee Titans. The Texans were having trouble in the first half of that Dallas game. And I think Tennessee isn't very good. On paper, the Texans should run away with this, but the Titans defense isn't that bad. They were playing really well this year. I feel like the L'Jarius Sneed thing could have been even bigger. I don't really know what's going on there. But, you got an absolute dog up front in Jeffrey Simmons. I got to be honest, I think my favorite look here might be the total at 40.5. I can see this one being a little bit more on the lower scoring side. What say you?
Yeah, I think it could definitely be on the lower scoring side. I think Tennessee's defense is not just okay. I think it's actually pretty good, almost very good. But they're a team that you're looking where people that were betting them, they're looking for the regression. They're clearly turning the football over too much. They're not forced turnovers themselves. They're poor at certain areas of the field. They're great defending the deep ball. And I feel like the general consensus is eventually, as in life, what goes up must come down, but it hasn't come down yet for the Titans. So you wouldn't catch me trying to catch a falling knife essentially with Tennessee. I do make it 8.5. I have to do probably a little bit of adjustments, but I'm never going to really get to a clear value laying 7.5 with Houston. I'm also not a big fan of CJ Stroud in terms of winning by margin. I think a lot of Stroud's value last year and now this year, which was depleted, was when Stroud was a short favorite or betting points. Now obviously the cat's out of the bag. I think that this Texans team is finally living up to a little bit of what I thought they'd be prior after a sluggish start. Not saying that they're in the Bills, Ravens, Lions league, but they're just a tier below. They're finally putting some things together. Their defense getting insane amounts of pressure against Will Levis. That is something absolutely massive because he's a mistake waiting to happen on every single snap. And at this point, I'm just not interested in backing, again, a Titans team where if you're betting on the Titans, you're banking on regression. Regression in this case being positive in Tennessee's case, but you're betting on some of these things finally normalizing. And, if you've done that for 12 weeks right now, it hasn't happened yet. So I don't want to be the one to be like getting in on it or kicking myself in the face and being like, oh, I've just talked about how they haven't regressed yet, and now they finally did it. Like, I don't want to be on that side. Lean Houston, no, nothing that I'm not going to be playing this game.
No doubt. It's tough, man. Houston is like, they're not playing up to their level. They're really not. I mean, Nico Collins coming back is huge. It sucked for anybody that had Nico Collins getting called back. A monster touchdown on the first play from scrimmage was definitely a bummer. All right, Kansas City, 10.5 at Carolina. Panthers off the bye. Panthers obviously are not good. We've seen some signs of life from Bryce Young, in his last game. Kansas City typically against these big spreads are very peculiar. You would think Kansas City wins this game by 30, and they very well could. Coming off a loss here against Buffalo, do you think they flex their muscles? Are you looking at a lay the 10.5? Are you looking at maybe laying Kansas City first half? They come out angry, ready to just completely pounce on the Panthers and put this game away by halftime?
No, honestly, it's not something I want anything to do with realistically. This is a game where you have to, if the Panthers don't run a single fake punt or fake field goal or something of that nature, I would be shocked. We saw Dallas do that on Monday night. I thought it was warranted. What do you have to lose? You got to give it a shot. Bryce Young, like you mentioned, is playing not horrible football. Finally, he's finally looking like an NFL quarterback. He's not great, but he's not dead last by a mile in a bunch of metrics. So that's always nice to see. This kid finally, playing a little bit of decent ball. But like you said, I don't have the numbers exactly in front of me, but Kansas City is not a team that destroys crappy opponents, nor destroys really everybody. They really do play a ton of tight games and mostly do come out with wins because of their experience and because they're just a hell of a football team, the way that they're constructed, and they're obviously well coached. But again, you're not catching me taking the Carolina Panthers. This total might be a tick high because I anticipate Kansas City being a little bit, I don't want to say lethargic because not they don't care because they're too good of a football team to not care. But I don't know how much Carolina's going to score. This defense for Kansas City is so good. I know Bryce Young's been playing well, but playing well for Bryce Young is going from the worst quarterback in football to the 30 or the 25th, 26th best quarterback in football. You know what I mean? So it's not this massive progression. They still lack overall pass catchers and weapons on offense. And Kansas City, this is a dream matchup. Going from playing a matchup in Buffalo to then having hopefully Xavier Worthy, I think Pacheco may be back as well. DeAndre Hopkins, there's nobody on Carolina that can match up with those kind of guys. Long-winded way of saying, though, I'm not touching this because of the Chiefs' inability to cover big spreads from their homes are normally overvalued in this spot. And by normally, I mean quite often. But I think I wouldn't be shocked. The Panthers are not coming out and winning this game outright or anything like that. That's just not happening. But if you're a 10-point teaser guy, if you can get a good price on maybe an offshore or a local, obviously Kansas City would be a look at there. But I don't want anything to do with betting the Panthers, and I'm not laying a big price with Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a stay away. Maybe get into some props. Not really much out there right now, but something that you can explore in the market. Another 10.5 points is Washington at home, laying it with Dallas. Dallas hosting the Giants on Thanksgiving. Interesting. To be honest, Washington really hasn't played that well recently. I know they stepped up and had to play Pittsburgh, a game, honestly, they should have won. Philadelphia, a game that they had, and, you can debate the Dan Quinn going for it on fourth down, which turned the entire game. Washington offensively has not played that well or didn't play that well. Dallas is a little bit different because they're nowhere near the talent level. But I got to be honest, I don't know if I'm laying 10.5 points with the Washington Commanders right now. I don't love what I'm seeing from them. If I had to pick a side, I think I'm going to lay it with Dallas because, the truth is, Eric, Dallas isn't completely incompetent. They're not completely incompetent. They're sort of incompetent, but Houston has one of the better defenses in the NFL. They run a very good scheme. They have a lot of talent. They have a great front four and a good linebacking group, and they play 1,000% foot on the gas even when they're up 1,000,000. Washington's defense has gotten better every week, and we can go back to the Saquon Barkley. They took a couple chances late in the game trying to make a play happen. I mean, they kept Philly's offense in check, for most of that game. Dallas, though, I think there's definitely some life here taking them at 10.5, getting 10.5.
I make it 9, so I definitely agree. Obviously, 10 being a key number. Washington, I could obviously talk ad nauseum about my Commanders, but at this point, though, I think to consider, though, with Dallas, like Cooper Rush, I know we threw for 300 plus on Monday. Like, I think that, like, obviously was an anomaly of sorts, but I think it was like a super anomaly. Like, he is not good at all. He is so quick on these quick throws. You have obviously that big Dowdle who broke away and had that 60+ yard reception. Yeah, he was moving the ball, but a lot of it also was toward the end of the game as well, where Houston wasn't necessarily suffocating him. He's another guy who's a sack fumble waiting to happen, which we obviously saw happen in Houston. He's one of the quickest times to throw in all of football. He doesn't stay in the pocket. Doesn't use his legs whatsoever. And this Washington pass rush and defensive line has actually been very good this season with Dante Fowler, Frankie Luvu coming in off the line, and then, of course, Deron Payne, rookie Johnny Newton as well. Like, they have performed well in the trenches. If Marshawn Lattimore is back and they can get CeeDee Lamb bracketed, we know that Dallas lacks any real weapon outside of CD. I think Dowdle will actually have a solid game, as Washington's run defense is very overrated. And for whatever reason, Dallas continues to want to establish the run the ball. And Washington is one of the higher neutral game run rates because teams have success running the ball in Washington. So I think 10.5 is asking for a little much. JD5 clearly is not fully healthy. I don't care what Dan Quinn says. He's wearing rib guards every single play. Like, he's not healthy. And this Washington team in general, and this is something I've talked about on many shows and just made this point, outside of Terry McLaurin, and obviously you have Austin Eckler's resurgence, Brian Robinson is decent, they don't have any weapons. Like, their weapons are really limited. JD5 has been elevating this team. Now he's hurting a shell of his self. I don't think it has anything to do with teams seeing, film on him and not know how to defend him. I think you have an injured quarterback who hasn't had a break yet because they haven't had their bye yet, with subpar weaponry and a subpar offensive line. That punching above the weight class was due to fall off a little bit. I don't know if Dallas could take a lot of advantage. I think if Michael Parsons can wreck this game a little bit, then Dallas could be a little bit more alive. But at 10.5 points, I definitely lean toward the Dallas Cowboys. Washington does not warrant being 10.5 points against this team.
Yeah, completely agree. I think that's a big spread. I feel like Washington's kind of just limping into their bye when they get it in 5 years.
Hopefully they have 2 winnable games. They have this game and then they have Tennessee. If they could win these 2, go into their bye at 9-4. If you're a Washington Commander fan, how can you not be like the happiest person in the world?
Yeah. 7.5 points is the Lions laying at Indianapolis with one of the highest totals of the week at 50.5. I think that's actually tied with the Baltimore Chargers game on Monday night, which we will get to momentarily. Detroit 7.5. Indianapolis showed some life here. Anthony Richardson didn't play great, but it was definitely a positive sign for Colts fans, for the organization, to see him make key plays down the stretch that led to his team winning the game, coming back from a deficit. Steps in the right direction, Eric. Jonathan Taylor, surprisingly was one of the few running backs this year that was able to take advantage of a defense of a Jets defense, run defense that honestly has been getting gashed all year. I was very surprised by that. I had a Taylor prop that didn't hit, but be that as it may, I think Detroit covers the spread. I like what Indy's doing. I am a big fan of Anthony Richardson, and I hope to continue to see him develop and get better. I think he could really be something in this league if he just continues to fine-tune his quarterback skills. But Detroit, man, they're the best team in football. They're playing at a different level. Their defense has improved even without Aiden Hutchinson. They lost Alex Anzalone, their key linebacker, so that could hurt them. He does a lot of stuff that doesn't go in the stat sheet. He's one of the heart and souls of that defense, but I think nevertheless, this is a Detroit Lions spot. 7.5, obviously the key number of 7 is something that, you wish you were not laying the hook, but I still think Detroit covers this spread. They're a wagon, ATS, and Indianapolis might get up for the first half, but as Detroit will do, they close, and I think that's what's going to happen in the second half as they end up covering this.
Yeah, no interest in fading Detroit at all. Even though I do make this game closer, pull my numbers, I make it actually 6-7-5. So I would seek clear value with Indianapolis, but I'm not betting on the Colts. No, it's not. I'm not betting on the Colts. I'm just not fading Detroit. It's just like why jump in front of the train. I think Richardson, though, this version of Richardson that we saw, obviously it's against a different opponent in a different defense. Though I think Detroit's defense can and will get exposed against a better offense. And I guess we shall see, as the Colts offense is one of the better ones they've seen lately, and that's not saying much. With that being said, though, it's just literally like Richardson is a high variance guy. If you want to, take some alt props on like Alec Pierce, again, catching a big deep ball or something like that, like, have a field day, get after it. But it's just like there's better ways to lose money. Like if I lose my money last week betting on Patrick Mahomes, okay, I'll go to sleep at fine at night. I lose money betting on Anthony Richardson against the Lions, like I'm not trying to lose my money that way.
Yeah, definitely. That's a hard one to swallow. Detroit Lions, baby, riding them all the way to the Super Bowl and beyond. All right, any interest here in this Broncos game, laying 6.5 at the Raiders? I know you have been interested in talking a lot about the Broncos one way or the other this year, so I'll let you take this one first.
I think it's inflated. I think Denver last week against the Falcons was kind of like a match made in heaven. I talked to some of my colleagues about it, did a show with Forward Progress. I was talking to Suma, a sports bettor, and we were breaking down this game on Monday as like a reaction. Obviously, this hindsight. But what Denver does great was what Atlanta does poorly, and vice versa. So it was a situation where Denver, obviously, again, it's hindsight, but the fact that Denver kind of beat them up as badly as they did, in retrospect, from a matchup standpoint, it was kind of a tailor-made matchup for Denver. Like you said last week, Las Vegas shouldn't have lost by 2 touchdowns to Miami last week. They were literally covering with 3 minutes to go for a 54-yard touchdown. Obviously, a poorly coached team, and the Broncos are the exact opposite. But I think asking Denver to lay this many points on the road is a massive overreaction, even though Las Vegas is a bad team. So I don't want, as it stands Wednesday, 8 o'clock, I don't have no interest in it right now. Maybe I'll see some tidbits or something that make me more excited about betting on Las Vegas. But I think this is inflated, Johnny. What about you?
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I got to be honest, though. Denver's impressed me. Bo Nix has really blossomed before our very eyes. And, when you have Sean Payton and his cachet, what he did to Drew Brees' career, how he turned Drew Brees from a very good quarterback to one of the best to ever play. Bo Nix is a guy with a lot of talent and a lot of years of experience at Oregon and in college. And the defense, obviously, the defense is one of the reasons why Denver can play the way they can and win. 6.5, though, the Raiders are a team I hate betting with the Raiders. They are a team that is so bad, but every now and then they have one of those games that kind of just shows up. I think the total may be a tick high. I don't know if I see Denver scoring 30 here. I could see them score probably like 24, maybe win something along the lines of 24-17, something 24-17-ish, which is kind of right in line where the total is. The 6.5, I'm having a tough time really making up my mind here. I probably need a little bit more time, but I think the total is a little low. Or I'm sorry, a little high. I'd probably lean a little bit more towards the under.
Totally.
All right, we got a few more games. Not Arizona Cardinals. San Francisco. Not really sure how to put this into words, but this is not the team that a lot of people expected. This is not the team that went to the Super Bowl last year. Talk about a shell of themselves. The 49ers are a dog at Green Bay. This was an appealing playoff game last year. Green Bay showed some fight, but ultimately the Niners steamrolled them, Eric. Now there's rumors about Nick Bosa being hurt. He hurt his oblique, or he had one oblique hurt, and then he was overcompensating and he hurt the other one. The defense is nothing like what we're accustomed to seeing. I mean, but I don't know if Green Bay is that good. I got to be honest, I might give San Francisco one more chance. It sounds like George Kittle's going to play. I think I'm going to ride with San Francisco one more time. Green Bay's defense got exposed by Chicago. San Francisco, obviously, the one key thing is see how Brock Purdy's shoulder is. That hinges everything. I feel like he's probably good to go, but that's something I'm going to keep my eye on. Assuming Purdy's good to go and Kittle's playing, I think I'm firing up San Francisco one last time to make some amends.
This is the second leg of my teaser with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. San Francisco plus 8.5. Pretty simple. Like you said, like a lot of the issues for San Francisco has been with scoring points and finishing games. And we saw last week. It's like you could look at it from like your fan perspective, not really dive in. Obviously, they blow that game, and you're like, oh, Shanahan can't close games. Why can't this team win a big game? Then if you really were watching the game, you notice that Shanahan drew up a beauty of a play to move the sticks for the Niners and potentially score a touchdown. And Purdy missed a wide open receiver that then ruined that football game. Ended up resulting in a loss when we would be talking about probably a much different spread here. Green Bay is boomer bust. They've been boomer bust all season long. That's been the reason why I've been slow to upgrade them as to like a really good team from just like a good team. When they boom, they boom. When they bust, their offense kind of stagnates and isn't really all that great. This defense has been a lot better. And the Niners, I talked about this prior to the season, teams that make the Super Bowl and lose, the next year they struggle. Like that Super Bowl hangover is more prevalent for the loser sometimes, or more often than not, than it is for even the winner of the Super Bowl. And we're seeing that with San Francisco. And just from a numbers perspective, like I don't make the Packers so much better. I actually make them 2.25 point favorites. Okay. But now you're giving me San Francisco in a teaser on DK at minus 120, getting 7 and 8.5. Done. Like Niners in a teaser for me is obviously like KC last week was a never overthink it, and they had that last minute Josh Allen touchdown to get it to 9 and kill the 6-point teasers. Yeah. All in the game, that stinks. I'm not scared off by that. This to me is like a don't think twice. Add Detroit, add Tampa Bay, add whoever else you like. Give me the Niners and teaser.
I think this total's a tick low too. I probably would lean towards 48, big number for 48. I think this gets there. I've had a lot of unders so far looking at the board, but I think this is one that can honestly break 50. I wasn't impressed. Green Bay's defense could not get off the field. They were lucky to win that game against Chicago. San Francisco's defense, you can move the ball on them, especially if Nick Bosa. First of all, if Nick Bosa doesn't play, that's a huge boost towards the over. But if Nick Bosa does play, I mean, this guy's limited right now. He's nowhere near close to 100% for a guy that's as explosive of an athlete as he is. Think about a regular person having one oblique that's bothering them, like just living ordinary life. This guy's got 2, and he's got to go play football against behemoths of human beings. I do think San Francisco and Green Bay probably cracks the 50 mark. So the over is something that I'm going to keep my eye on this week. I think San Francisco is going to be ready to lay some hurt on Green Bay. Culmination time. Monday Night Football, Harbaugh Bowl, Ravens 3-point favorites at the Los Angeles Chargers. Take it away.
Both numbers. I make it 3.75, so I actually do see value on the Ravens here. The Chargers just haven't beat anybody worth beating. Like, yes, they beat the Bengals, but if you obviously saw what happened there, they blew the lead, and they had to put together a 4-play drive to then, steal that win against the Bengals defense that has been, obviously absolutely atrocious this year, and is the sole reason why this team is on the outside looking at the playoff picture and may not even make the playoffs. This Baltimore offense is an absolute wagon. You have the Harbaugh Bowl, which is obviously going to be very tough to quantify. You have the Chargers team that we've talked about a few times this year. They have an identity, which is what makes them so good. And Justin Herbert is absolutely balling out. I've been giving him his flowers for, at this point, 6 or 7 weeks. I'll pat myself on the back for being ahead of the curve on Herbert, still being Herbert of the last couple of years and the phenom he has been since entering the league. The Chargers, again, I'm just not impressed with who they've beaten, and I think that their defense at this point is overrated. I know they played a good Bengals offense, and they still have 27, so it's not like that's a huge, egg on their face situation when you let a good offense score 27. It's all in the game of football. But this Ravens offense is unlike anything that they've seen outside of Cincinnati, where, again, they had 27 and had to score that last-minute touchdown to take that win in regulation. So I have a slight lean. Obviously, we have time on this one being Monday, but I like the Ravens. I also like the over. Ravens defense is an absolute pass funnel. Justin Herbert slings it with the best of them. I think neither team has any issue moving the ball and then scoring the football. Like the Ravens, like the over.
Ravens win, cover in the over. Completely agree. Listen, bro, I think when you look at it, this is a classic rebound spot for the Ravens. It's a team that is very, very difficult to lose 2-0. Believe me, I'm going to be rooting for the Chargers. I want the Chargers to win. I want the Ravens done. I want them out. But I don't see them losing 2 in a row here. It is tough to be on the road. You got to go at Pittsburgh, then you got to go across country at the Chargers. But, matchup-wise, I think you hit the nail on the head. The Chargers defense has been very overrated. It's good, but they're 15 points per game or 13 points per game coming into the Cincinnati game was a little overblown. You saw the Bengals put up 27 on them, and a lot of it was done in one half. The Ravens, I feel like, are going to be able to get back to the run. They're not going to keep Derrick Henry on the shelf for the fourth quarter, most likely. I think Lamar is going to be able to find running room. I think he's going to find open receivers with Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, et cetera. I think they'll be able to string together enough stops. The Chargers' offense has been good, but there's definitely some things missing. I don't think it's been like perfectly executed as the numbers may lead you to believe. Over is definitely in play at 50.5. Also worth noting, it is a J.K. Dobbins revenge game. It is a Gus Edwards revenge game. Fire up those two, or definitely Dobbins for an anytime touchdown. Dobby scored 2 last week. I do like some revenge game tutties. I know a lot of people do. But, Baltimore win, cover in the over. I think that's definitely the play for me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you big time.
Actually, the one interesting thing is it's 3 on FanDuel. Chargers +3 is -120. So that could actually be coming back down, which would get it inside of a field goal. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That'll do it for us. No real touchdowns to look at. I hate DraftKings touchdowns because their prices are terrible. FanDuel's are much better. But we appreciate everybody for joining us. I know it was a long show, but we had a lot to talk about. Eric, I appreciate you taking the time to break everything down with us, brother. Thank you so much.
Of course, bro. Glad to be here. Hope everybody enjoys the content, learns a little bit of something. And, obviously we're giving out some plays, things we like, but we also obviously talk about, matchups. We talk about strategies. We talk about underlying things in the NFL. So if at the very least you guys, picked up a tidbit or two to help you guys become better handicappers, that's all I can ask for.
100%, no doubt. Everybody, thank you so much. TBD on the podcast next week. Wednesday, I have a rehearsal dinner.
Oh.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I will be TBD on if the podcast is next Wednesday. or next Tuesday. But in any case, we will try to get one back to you. And for whatever reason, if I don't speak to you guys, I hope you have a fantastic Thanksgiving, great Black Friday, save some money, go buy some shit, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Peace out, guys.